Good evening, and welcome back to SleepWise. Tonight, you don't have to chase sleep like a prize that keeps moving just ahead of you. Instead, we'll simply get close to it, the way you'd sit beside a quiet fire and notice how warmth travels, without needing to understand every spark. Sleep is not the absence of life. It is a different kind of life, with its own tempo, its own gentle logic, and its own work that can only be done when the day loosens its grip. All over the world, in apartments and houses, on ships and in desert camps, bodies are preparing for the same ancient shift. Eyes grow heavier, muscles soften, breath becomes a little slower, and the brain begins to turn its attention inward. If you have ever wondered why you can feel tired yet still alert, or why a single bright screen can make midnight feel like noon, you're already touching the edges of sleep science. It is the study of timing, chemistry, and rhythm. And tonight, we'll let those ideas arrive quietly, like rain on a window. We'll talk about the two forces that guide almost every night. One is your inner clock, the circadian rhythm, which keeps time even when you're not watching. The other is sleep pressure, a slow, steady build that rises through the day, asking for rest the way thirst asks for water. We'll visit the stages of sleep, too. The light, drifting shore, the deeper currents, and the vivid dreaming sea that returns again and again in cycles. None of it is mysterious in a frightening way. It is simply intricate, like a garden at night. And we'll do something else that matters. We'll treat your sleep with kindness, not as a performance to optimize or a problem to solve tonight, but as a relationship you can rebuild gently, one evening at a time. So settle in the way you like to settle in. Let your shoulders drop a fraction. Let the room be dim, even if only a little. And as you listen, imagine your body recognizing a familiar message. For a while now, nothing is required of you. In a moment, we'll start with the simplest question of all: what sleep is for, and why your brain returns to it each night, like the moon returning to the sky. Long before laboratories, people noticed patterns, drowsiness arriving on schedule, and morning light rinsing it away. In the last century, scientists learned to listen more closely, using small sensors to trace the brain's electrical whisper. Those traces revealed something comforting. Sleep is not one flat state, but a journey through stages, and your brain moves through them with steady order. If you wake in the night, you haven't failed at anything. You may have surfaced between waves at a normal crossing point, and your mind is only checking the horizon before it drifts back. Let the science be soothing rather than stimulating. Each idea we meet is here to make sleep feel less like a mystery to conquer and more like a place your body already knows. In the first soft minutes of night, it can help to remember that sleep has a job. Not a job in the way your calendar does, with demands and deadlines, but a quiet kind of work that keeps you going without asking for applause. Across the day, your body spends itself in small ways you barely notice. Cells trade chemicals, muscles tighten and release, the immune system patrols, and your brain files away thousands of tiny impressions, most of them too ordinary to name. Sleep is the interval when many of those tasks become easier, because attention is no longer pulling resources toward the outside world. Your heart rate tends to slow, breathing grows more regular, and the nervous system shifts away from do and toward restore. One reason you can feel better after a solid night is that sleep supports balance. It helps steady hormones, tune metabolism, and keep the immune system responsive without being overreactive. Researchers have found that even a single short night can nudge appetite signals, mood, and focus as if the body is slightly out of alignment with its own best settings. This doesn't mean every rough night is a crisis. The body is resilient, and sleep is not an all-or-nothing bargain. But it does remind us why sleep returns so persistently, why every animal that sleeps protects it in its own way, whether by burrowing, flocking, or finding a hidden corner. In humans, much of the deepest physical restoration tends to happen earlier in the night, when the brain spends more time in slow-wave sleep. That's when growth hormone pulses more strongly, and the body leans into repair and maintenance. Later, as morning approaches, dreaming sleep becomes more common, and the brain's work shifts toward memory, emotion, and integration. Tonight, you don't need to memorize these facts. Just let them settle like a gentle reassurance. There is a reason your eyelids grow heavy, and a reason your body keeps inviting you back to this familiar dark. Sleep is not wasted time. It is care, quietly delivered in the only hours when you can't interrupt it. There is also a kind of housekeeping that seems to become easier during sleep. When you are awake, the brain is busy with signals and decisions, and its support systems keep pace as best they can. During sleep, especially in the deeper stages, fluid spaces in the brain appear to change in a way that helps wash through tissues and carry away metabolic byproducts. Scientists still refine the details, but the broad idea is simple and comforting. Sleep gives the brain time to clean, to reset the environment in which thoughts will move tomorrow. You can imagine it like a quiet street after midnight when the traffic thins and sweeping becomes possible again. And while sleep has purposes, it also has rules. Gentle ones, but real. Most nights are shaped by two steady forces that move beneath your awareness, like tides you feel without seeing the moon. The first is your internal clock, the circadian rhythm, which helps decide when your body expects wakefulness and when it expects rest. The second is sleep pressure, a gradual build of need that rises the longer you stay awake. If you've ever felt a second wind late at night, that can be these forces briefly crossing paths. Sleep pressure may be high, asking you to stop, while your clock is still signaling alertness, keeping the lights on inside you for a little longer. Scientists often describe this as a two-process system. One process is timing, and the other is accumulation, and together they explain why you can't always sleep just because you want to. Sleep pressure is closely linked to a substance called adenosine, which builds in the brain as you use energy through the day. As adenosine rises, it increases the feeling of drowsiness, a quiet persuasion that grows stronger with every hour awake. When you finally sleep, adenosine levels tend to fall and the pressure releases, which is why a good night can make morning feel lighter. Caffeine works largely by blocking adenosine receptors, turning down the brain's ability to hear that sleepy message for a while. It doesn't erase the pressure. It postpones your awareness of it, like closing a window on a sound that is still happening outside. Meanwhile, your circadian clock is not simply a habit. It's a biological timekeeper coordinated by a small region deep in the brain that responds especially to light and darkness. Even without clocks or schedules, it would still create a daily pattern in body temperature, alertness, digestion, and hormone release. That pattern is why many people feel a natural dip in the early afternoon and why late evening can feel alerting for some, even when the day has been long. When these two forces align, high sleep pressure and a circadian signal for night, sleep can arrive with less effort. When they don't align, sleep can feel slippery, not because you're broken, but because the timing is off. And timing, as we'll keep discovering tonight, can be adjusted gently, with patience rather than force. This is why a steady wake time often matters more than a perfect bedtime. Waking at a consistent hour gives the clock a reliable morning to aim for, and sleep pressure then has a clearer chance to build and release in a healthy rhythm. When weekends shift far later, the clock can drift, and Monday can feel like a small time zone change, sometimes called social jet lag. None of this requires strictness. It only invites a simple experiment. When the body knows what time it is, it relaxes into the night more easily. To understand the body clock, it helps to picture a conductor standing quietly in the dark, guiding an orchestra you rarely see. In humans, that conductor is often linked to a tiny cluster of neurons in the hypothalamus, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a name that sounds technical, but simply points to its location above the optic pathways. Its most important job is to keep time and to keep the rest of the body in step. It does this by responding to cues from the environment, especially light, and then coordinating daily patterns in temperature, alertness, and hormone signals. Light in the morning tends to shift the clock earlier, making it easier to feel sleepy earlier the next night. Light late at night tends to shift the clock later, telling the brain, in effect, that evening is still ongoing. This is why a bright phone screen can feel louder than you expect, even if the room is quiet. The brain doesn't interpret light only as something you're looking at. It can interpret it as what time it is. Scientists call cues like light, meals, and activity Zeitgebers, a word that means time givers. Morning sunlight is one of the strongest time givers we have, and it can be surprisingly effective even on cloudy days. Because outdoor light is usually far brighter than indoor light. As evening comes, most bodies begin to lower core temperature slightly, a slow drift that supports sleepiness. At the same time, alertness signals that helped you through the day begin to soften. When schedules stay stable, these shifts become more predictable, and predictability is soothing to the nervous system. But if you travel, work nights, or change sleep times often, the clock can become confused and you might feel tired at odd hours or wide awake when you'd rather not be. That feeling can be frustrating, but it's also a clue. The clock is doing what it was built to do, using light and routine to estimate the world. Tonight, we're not here to fight that clock. We're here to understand it so we can cooperate with it as gently as turning down the lights and letting your evening become unmistakably evening. And your clock is not only in the brain. Many organs have their own rhythmic patterns, often called peripheral clocks, and they take cues from sleep, meals, and movement. That's one reason heavy eating can sometimes make the night feel more restless, and why a regular mealtime rhythm can quietly support a regular sleep rhythm. In modern life, we ask our biology to be flexible, and it often tries. But when you give it a few steady signals, a similar wake time, a little morning light, a calmer evening, the whole system starts to synchronize again, like instruments finding the same tempo. When the clock senses that night has truly arrived, it begins to release a familiar signal: melatonin. Melatonin is sometimes treated like a sleeping pill in conversation, but it's more accurate to think of it as a timing cue, a biochemical whisper that says, "It is night now." Your brain produces it naturally in dim light, and bright light can suppress it, especially the kind of light that is rich in blue wavelengths. This is not a moral lesson about screens. It's just biology, and biology is often very literal. Light means day. Dim means night. When you create darkness gradually, even small changes can matter. A lamp instead of overhead lighting, warmer tones, lower brightness, a room that feels like dusk instead of noon. These are simple ways of telling the clock that it can shift gears. Some people notice that when they step outside in the morning, even for 10 minutes, their evenings become a little easier. That morning light anchors the clock, and a better anchored clock tends to offer melatonin earlier and more consistently. There is also a gentle relationship between melatonin and temperature. As melatonin rises, the body tends to cool slightly, and that cooling supports the onset of sleep. You might feel it as a desire for a blanket or as a comfort in a slightly cooler room. If you've ever fallen asleep more easily after a warm shower, part of that effect can be the cooling that follows when you step out. As heat leaves the skin, and the body drifts toward night. None of these are rules you must obey. They're levers you can hold lightly. Sleep does not ask for perfection. It asks for a few consistent hints. So tonight, if the room can be a little dimmer, let it. If your jaw can unclench, let it. If your breath can slow on the exhale, let it. And as melatonin rises in its own time, you can begin to trust something simple. Your body recognizes night, and it knows how to follow it. People sometimes take melatonin as a supplement, and for some situations like shifting a schedule or adjusting to travel, it can be used as a timing tool. But even without supplements, the natural signal is often enough when the environment supports it. And the most dependable method is still the quiet one: light by day, dim by night, and patience in between. If you wake at 3 a.m. and worry that melatonin has run out, you can let that worry go. Melatonin is only one part of the story, and wake-ups can happen for many ordinary reasons. A change between sleep cycles, a sound, a thought, the body briefly checking its surroundings. The best response is rarely to chase sleep harder. It is to make the night boring again. Low light, little movement, gentle breathing, and a mind that is allowed to be unremarkable. In that kind of quiet, the clock often does what it has always done. It turns the page and invites you back into the dark. A little deeper into the night, we can meet the quiet messengers that guide your state from wake to sleep and back again. One of them is adenosine, the substance that builds as you spend energy through the day. You don't feel adenosine directly the way you feel heat or hunger, but you know its shape. The soft heaviness behind the eyes, the way attention blurs at the edges, the rising sense that rest would be kind. As the hours pass, adenosine accumulates in the brain, increasing what we've been calling sleep pressure. Sleep pressure is not mood, and it is not motivation. It's a biological slope that grows steeper the longer you're awake. When you finally sleep, adenosine gradually clears and the pressure eases, which is part of why morning can feel like a reset rather than simply the next hour. Caffeine works mainly by blocking adenosine receptors, which means the brain has trouble hearing the message that says you've been awake long enough. It's less like borrowing energy and more like turning down a dimmer switch on your drowsiness for a while. But the build still continues in the background, which is why late caffeine can sometimes make you feel strangely wired and strangely tired at the same time. Another messenger is cortisol, often described as a stress hormone, but it's also a normal part of your daily rhythm. Cortisol tends to be higher in the morning, helping you become alert, mobilize energy, and rise into the day. As evening arrives, cortisol is usually lower, making room for the night system to take over. When stress keeps cortisol elevated late, it can feel as if your body is holding the door open for daytime, even when your mind wants to close it. This is not a failure of will, it's simply chemistry responding to perceived demand. And then there is melatonin again, not as a sedative, but as a night flag, rising in dim light, reminding the body that it's safe to shift. When these signals cooperate, rising adenosine, falling cortisol, rising melatonin, sleep can arrive with a kind of inevitability. When they clash, sleep may arrive more slowly, and the best support is often gentle, dim light, steady routine, and a calm attitude toward the process. Tonight, you don't need to fix your chemistry. Just notice that your body runs on messages, and most of them are trying to help you, even when they feel inconvenient. And as you listen, you can let the idea settle quietly. Your sleepiness is not weakness. It is a signal that the system is working. Scientists call this part of sleep regulation homeostatic, meaning it balances itself like a scale returning toward level. The longer you stay awake, the more the scale tips toward sleep. The longer you sleep, the more it tips back toward wakefulness. It is an ordinary law of the body, steady and forgiving, and it will keep doing its quiet work even on nights when you feel impatient with it. If chemistry is the messaging, then the body's physical setting is the stage. And one of the most important stage directions is temperature. Most people fall asleep more easily as their core body temperature begins to drift down in the evening. It's a small change, measured in fractions of a degree, but the nervous system notices. You might feel it as a desire for cooler air, or as comfort in a light blanket, or as the simple relief of turning a warm room into a calmer one. Your skin plays a role here, too. When blood vessels in the hands and feet widen slightly, they can release heat, helping the body cool, which can support sleep onset. This is why warm socks help some people, not because warmth is the goal, but because it can encourage that gentle heat release. A warm shower or bath can sometimes help in the same indirect way. You step out into cooler air, the skin releases heat, and the body begins to slide toward its nighttime set point. Think of it as the body taking off a coat it no longer needs. The bedroom itself becomes a kind of sleep habitat, and small changes can make it feel more like night. Cooler air, softer light, fewer sharp sounds, and bedding that feels comfortable against the skin. These are not luxuries, they are cues. The brain reads cues constantly. It reads them for danger, for work, for novelty, and also for rest. When the cues are consistent, the brain spends less energy deciding what to do next. And less decision-making is, in its own quiet way, soothing. Noise matters too, but often not in the way people think. A sudden sound is more likely to pull you up than a steady one. That's why consistent background audio like rain, a fan, or gentle white noise can feel calming. It smooths the edges of the environment. Light is the strongest cue, and it doesn't need to be perfect. If you can make the evening dimmer than the day, you've already helped your clock. If you can make your room dark enough that your eyes aren't constantly reminded of daytime, you've helped even more. But there is a deeper point underneath all of this. These cues are not rules to fear. They are ways of telling the body, kindly and repeatedly, that it is allowed to stand down. So, if tonight is imperfect, a little warm, a little noisy, a little bright, let it be imperfect. You can still soften your shoulders. You can still lengthen the exhale. You can still become quieter inside, because the most powerful sleep cue is often not the room, but the moment you stop treating wakefulness as an emergency. And in that softer attitude, the body often finds its path into sleep all on its own. Even a single repeated ritual can become a cue. The same mug, the same chair, the same gentle music. With time, your brain begins to associate that sequence with safety. And safety is the doorway sleep prefers. Once the room is quieter, the next shift happens inside the skull, where the brain begins to change its pattern of activity. In the last century, scientists learned to listen to these changes with a tool called an EEG, which measures the brain's electrical rhythms from the scalp. The result is not a mind-reading device, and it doesn't reveal thoughts. It reveals tempo, the speed and shape of the brain's collective whisper. As you grow drowsy, that whisper tends to slow. The fast, busy rhythm of alert wakefulness gives way to softer waves, and the border between waking and sleeping becomes less of a line and more of a shoreline. The first stage of sleep is often called N1, and it is light and brief. In N1, you might still hear the room. You might still feel a thought drift by. Muscles can twitch, and sometimes you sense a falling feeling, a small jolt that startles you back for a moment. This is normal. It is the body testing its balance as it hands control from wakefulness to sleep. Then comes N2, which makes up a large portion of many nights. In N2, the brain begins to protect sleep more actively. It produces short bursts of activity called sleep spindles and brief waves called K-complexes. Names that sound clinical, but you can imagine them as little guards at the gate. They help the brain filter outside noise, so sleep can continue even if the world is not perfectly still. During N2, breathing becomes more regular, body temperature continues its gentle drop, and heart rate often slows. If N1 is the doorway, N2 is the settling room where you stop checking the hallway. And for many people, this settling happens again and again through the night. Sleep is not a straight dive to the bottom. It is a gradual descent, with pauses, with layers, and with a kind of quiet intelligence. If you ever feel like you only got light sleep, it may help to know that light sleep is still sleep. It still supports memory, still supports rest, and still provides the bridge to deeper stages when the time is right. Tonight, you don't need to track your stages. You don't need to score your night. You can simply let the brain do what it evolved to do. Move from alert rhythm to slower rhythm, from guarding the world to tending the self. And as you listen, you may notice moments when your own thoughts become less linear, more like drifting clouds. That, too, is a sign that the shoreline is near, and you are already beginning to cross it. Some people worry that the twitch or jolt means anxiety is winning. More often, it's simply a hypnic jerk, a common transition signal, like a loose thread being trimmed before the mind settles. If it happens, you can treat it as a harmless ripple. Breathe out slowly and let the next wave carry you onward. Because sleep, at its best, is not something you accomplish. It is something you allow. After the lighter stages have done their quiet settling, the brain can move into deep sleep, often called N3, or slow wave sleep. Here, the EEG shows large, slow waves, as if the brain has turned from quick chatter to long, calm breaths. In deep sleep, it can be harder to wake someone, and if you do, they may feel disoriented for a moment, as if their mind was far away. This is the stage many people imagine when they say, "I slept like a rock." Deep sleep tends to be more abundant in the first part of the night. That timing matters. It means that an earlier portion of sleep often carries a lot of the body's heavier maintenance, tissue repair, immune support, and a general lowering of metabolic demand. Heart rate slows, breathing becomes steady, muscles relax more fully. For children and adolescents, deep sleep is often especially prominent, and it is one reason why sleep is so closely tied to growth and development. For adults, deep sleep can still be deeply restorative, even if the percentage changes with age. There is also evidence that some forms of brain cleaning become more active during deep sleep. Researchers have described a system of fluid movement that helps clear metabolic byproducts, and while the details are still being refined, the image is gentle. When the brain is not busy with the outside world, it has more space to tidy itself. If you like, you can picture the mind as a city. In the day, the streets are crowded with traffic. At night, the traffic thins and the maintenance crews can finally move through. Deep sleep also supports memory, not by making dreams, but by strengthening certain kinds of learning, especially skills and routines. It's as if the brain practices quietly without your permission, smoothing the rough edges of what you repeated during the day. And yet, even as we describe deep sleep, it's important to keep the tone kind. You cannot force yourself into slow-wave sleep by wanting it hard enough. You can only create the conditions that make it more likely: steady timing, sufficient sleep opportunity, reduced late-night stimulation, and a body that feels safe. Some nights will have more deep sleep, some nights less. The system is dynamic. It adapts to stress, to illness, to travel, to exercise, and to the simple fact that you are alive. So tonight, let deep sleep be a friend you invite, not a target you chase. The invitation is quiet, dim light, a cooler room, a softer mind. And then the brain may choose in its own time to slow its waves and do its unseen work. If you ever wake from deep sleep, you may feel heavy and foggy, a phenomenon called sleep inertia. It can last minutes, sometimes longer, and it is simply the brain rising slowly back toward daylight speed. Even that fog is not a sign of harm. It is evidence that you are somewhere deep, somewhere quiet, and your mind is taking its time returning. As the night continues, the balance begins to shift. Deep sleep becomes a little less dominant, and another state visits more often. REM sleep, named for the rapid eye movements that can occur beneath closed lids. REM is sometimes called paradoxical sleep because the brain can look active, almost awake, while the body remains deeply relaxed. In REM, many muscles are temporarily inhibited, a protective feature that helps prevent you from acting out your dreams. Breathing can become a bit more variable. Heart rate may change, and the brain's emotional and memory networks can become lively, weaving impressions into the strange, tender fabric of dreams. Dreaming is not limited to REM, but REM is where vivid, story-like dreams are more common for many people. Scientists have proposed many roles for dreaming. Some ideas emphasize memory integration, the brain linking new experiences to older ones. Some emphasize emotional processing, turning down the sting of difficult moments by revisiting them in a softened, symbolic way. Some emphasize creativity, exploring combinations the waking mind would dismiss too quickly. No single explanation has won the whole debate, but a gentle theme runs through them. Dreams may be part of how the brain learns what to keep, what to release, and how to make sense of being human. Across a typical night, sleep cycles through NREM and REM in repeating patterns. A cycle is often roughly 90 minutes, though it varies, and the night is not a machine. Early cycles contain more deep sleep. Later cycles contain more REM. This is one reason the last hours of sleep can feel mentally rich, even if you don't remember the details. It's also why cutting the night short can sometimes affect mood. The later REM-heavy portion may be reduced. Between cycles, it is common to surface briefly. These micro-awakenings can last only seconds, and you may not remember them at all. They are like a dolphin's breath between dives, a moment at the surface to check the world, then back down. When people notice these awakenings, they sometimes assume something is wrong. Often, nothing is wrong. It is part of the architecture. What matters is not that you woke, but what you do next. If you treat it as normal, keep the lights low, keep your body still, and keep the mind unoccupied, the next cycle often arrives quietly. If you treat it as a problem, the brain becomes alert and the doorway narrows. So tonight, as we move forward, hold this as a soothing fact. Your sleep is not meant to be perfectly uninterrupted. It is meant to be rhythmic. Waves, pauses, waves again, and your body has been doing this for a lifetime, even on nights you thought you were failing. The rhythm is older than your worries, and kinder than them. Deep sleep has a weight to it, even when you can't feel it happening. In this stage, the brain's activity becomes slow and synchronized, like a room full of lanterns dimming in the same calm rhythm. Researchers call it slow-wave sleep, and it often arrives earlier in the night, when sleep pressure is still high and the body is most ready to sink. Your heart rate tends to drift lower, your breathing steadies, and your muscles soften, as if the whole body is finally allowed to unclench. It's also a time when the brain becomes less responsive to the outside world, which is why waking from deep sleep can feel like surfacing from underwater. That foggy heaviness has a name: sleep inertia, a harmless lag as the brain returns from its slow tempo to daytime speed. Deep sleep supports the body's maintenance in quiet ways: repair signals, immune calibration, and a general lowering of demand, as if the system is finally off duty. Scientists also study how the sleeping brain clears metabolic byproducts. And while the details are still being refined, the picture is soothing. When the mind is not busy with the day, it has more space to tidy itself. Imagine a city after midnight, when traffic fades and the maintenance crews finally move through the streets. But deep sleep is not something you can order on command. You can't bargain with it, and you can't force it by trying harder, because effort is an awakening signal, not a lullaby. What you can do is make it more likely by giving the night a steady shape, a consistent wake time, enough total time in bed, dim light in the evening, and a room that feels cool and safe. Deep sleep can be sensitive to stress, illness, travel, and late stimulation, and it can return on its own when life steadies again. Deep sleep also seems to support the body's sense of balance, the quiet regulation that helps appetite, energy, and immunity stay steadier. When deep sleep is reduced for a while, some people notice they feel hungrier, more foggy, or more easily worn down, as if the system is spending tomorrow's energy today. Again, this is not meant to scare you. It is meant to reassure you that your tiredness has a reason, and that the body is always trying to correct course. If you can't sleep as long as you'd like, you can still help by protecting the first hours of the night, when slow-wave sleep is most likely to appear. Even a small improvement there can feel meaningful. And if tonight is not that night, you can let the night be imperfect, because recovery is not a single door. It is a hallway with many doors, and sleep keeps offering them. So tonight, let deep sleep be a friend you invite, not a target you chase. The invitation is quiet: darkness, time, and a gentler mind. And then the brain chooses, in its own time, to slow its waves and do its unseen work. As the night continues, sleep doesn't stay in one place. It travels in cycles, moving from lighter stages into deeper ones, then rising again toward dreaming, like a tide that comes and goes without asking permission. A full cycle is often close to 90 minutes, but it can vary, and the night is never a perfect machine. Early cycles usually contain more deep sleep, and later cycles usually contain more REM, which is why the last hours of sleep can feel mentally rich, even if you don't remember the details. Between cycles, it's common to surface briefly. These micro-awakenings can be only a few seconds long, so small that the brain often forgets them immediately. They're not automatically a problem, and in many ways they're normal checkpoints, like a sailor glancing at the horizon before returning below deck. If you wake and notice the room, it doesn't mean your sleep is broken. It may simply mean you've reached a natural crossing point between stages where wakefulness is closest to the surface. What matters most is not the awakening itself, but the story you attached to it. If the story is something is wrong, the body responds with alertness and the doorway back to sleep narrows. If the story is this is a normal pause, the body stays quieter, and the next wave can arrive on its own. It can help to keep the night boring. Low light, minimal movement, and a gentle return to stillness tell the brain there is nothing new to solve. If you need a focus, choose something repetitive and small. A slow count of breaths, a familiar phrase, a soft scan of the body. Sometimes the mind argues with this rhythm, insisting that sleep should be smooth, silent, and complete. But many healthy sleepers wake briefly several times a night, often without remembering it, and the body returns to sleep the way a river returns to its channel. If you do remember the awakening, you can treat it as a moment to practice neutrality. Notice the pillow, notice the weight of the blanket, notice the room's darkness, and let thoughts pass like cars on a distant road. If a worry arrives, you don't need to answer it. You can remind yourself gently that the brain solves problems better in the morning and that the night is for drifting, not for debating. The more ordinary the moment feels, the sooner the next cycle tends to begin. And if sleep comes in pieces, those pieces still add up. The body is quietly counting even when you are not. REM sleep is sometimes described as a strange compromise between waking and sleeping. The brain becomes more active in certain networks, while the body becomes more still, protected by a temporary reduction in muscle tone that helps keep dreams from becoming actions. Behind closed eyelids, eyes can flicker, and breathing can become a little more variable, as if the nervous system is practicing a different kind of movement. From the outside, the sleeper looks peaceful, but inside, the brain is busy in a softer way, linking, sorting, replaying, and reframing. Dreams often feel most vivid in REM, though dreaming can appear in other stages too. You may not remember most dreams because memory systems are altered during sleep, and waking attention is the glue that usually holds a story in place. But even forgotten dreams may still have done their work. Scientists have proposed that REM supports learning and memory, especially for emotional and associative material, the kinds of things that don't fit neatly into a list. It may help the brain connect new experiences to older ones, as if building quiet bridges in the dark. Some researchers also suggest that REM helps regulate emotion by revisiting feelings at a lower intensity, like turning down the sharpness of an image without erasing it. If you've ever woken with your heart racing from a dream, you may have risen at the edge of REM, where feelings are close to the surface. That, too, can be normal. You can meet it like a wave. Notice it, breathe out slowly, and let it pass without building a story around it. Across a typical night, REM periods become longer toward morning, which is one reason sleeping a little later can sometimes feel psychologically restorative. And it's why cutting the night short can sometimes leave you more sensitive, as if the emotional polishing step was interrupted. It also helps to know that REM is not a sign that you are too awake. It is a real sleep state, and the body is still resting, even while the brain is active in particular ways. REM can be lighter than deep sleep, which is why noises near morning can wake you more easily. That sensitivity is not weakness, it is timing. If you wake from REM, you may remember a dream more clearly, because you surfaced while the story was still close. You don't have to interpret it. You can let it dissolve the way a cloud dissolves at sunrise and return your attention to the slow, steady physical facts of the room. Exhale, stillness, dimness, quiet. Some nights you may have little REM, some nights more. The brain adjusts, and then it settles back into its long, patient pattern. It isn't something to chase, only something to allow. And in that allowing, sleep often arrives again without explanation. Memory is one of sleep's quiet miracles because it works without your conscious effort. During the day, your brain is flooded with input, faces, words, decisions, sounds, and tiny emotional shifts that you may barely notice. If all of it stayed equally important, the mind would become cluttered very quickly. So the brain sorts, and sleep appears to be one of the main sorting sessions. Researchers describe memory consolidation as the process of stabilizing and strengthening certain memories while letting others fade, a gentle editing that makes room for tomorrow. Some forms of learning, like motor skills and routines, seem to benefit from deep sleep, as if the brain practices the pattern when the world is quiet. Other forms, like emotional and associative learning, may benefit from REM, when the brain can combine ideas more freely. Sometimes you struggle with a problem late at night, give up, and then find the solution more easily the next day, as if your mind kept working while you rested. This doesn't mean sleep is a magical tutor. It means the brain is a living network, and sleep changes the network's conditions, making certain connections easier to strengthen. Sleep also helps decide what belongs in long-term storage. A memory that feels meaningful, repeated, or emotionally marked is more likely to be kept, like a page placed carefully in an album. A memory that is trivial or rarely used may fade, and that fading is not failure, it's efficiency. Even forgetting can be a form of intelligence. And because emotion tags memory, stress can change what the brain chooses to rehearse in the dark, making the night feel mentally louder. This is one reason a gentle wind down matters, not as discipline, but as kindness to what your brain will be sorting while you rest. Sleep also helps separate signal from noise. It strengthens what you practiced, and it softens what was random, which is one reason repetition matters for learning and why calm repetition matters for bedtime. Your brain is always looking for patterns, and a nightly routine becomes a pattern it can trust. When the routine is consistent, the brain spends less energy predicting what comes next, and that saved energy can be used for consolidation instead of vigilance. This is why a simple wind down can feel surprisingly powerful, even if it's small. The same lights, the same music, the same few pages of a book. It becomes a message to the memory system. The day is over, and it's time to file things away. You can think of sleep as the librarian of your days, shelving what matters, discarding what doesn't, and keeping the mind from overflowing, quietly, gently, without judgment, and often without you noticing it at all. Sleep shapes how you feel, not just what you remember. After a short or broken night, emotions can become sharper, patience thinner, and small frustrations unusually loud. This isn't a personal weakness. It's the nervous system running with fewer reserves, like a phone on low battery that dims the screen and closes apps to survive. One reason sleep affects mood is that it helps regulate the balance between emotional regions and control regions in the brain. When you're well rested, the mind can respond to stress with more flexibility, choosing a wider range of interpretations and reactions. When you're sleep deprived, the alarm system sits closer to the surface, and reactivity becomes easier. REM sleep, in particular, has been linked to emotional processing, and many scientists think it helps reduce the sting of difficult experiences, not by erasing them, but by integrating them into a larger context so they feel less like open wounds and more like closed chapters. This is why a good night can make yesterday's worry feel smaller, even if nothing outside you has changed. You may still remember the problem, but your body is no longer reacting as if it is happening right now. Sleep also supports attention and decision-making, which are quietly tied to emotion. When focus is harder, the day feels more demanding, and demand often becomes stress. So sleep and stress can form a loop. Stress makes sleep harder, and less sleep makes stress feel stronger. The goal is not to break the loop with force. It is to loosen it gently, one cue at a time, and one calmer response at a time. If you've ever noticed that sleep loss makes you more sensitive to rejection, more impatient in traffic, or more reactive to a message, that is the loop in action. The brain is not only tired, it is more cautious, scanning for threat, because it has fewer resources to handle surprise. In that state, even neutral events can feel charged. This is why the most helpful response after a rough night is often compassionate simplicity. More light in the morning, more water, fewer sharp commitments if you can manage it, and a gentle plan to protect the next night rather than punish yourself for the last one. Sleep science, at its best, replaces shame with understanding. It says, your mind is doing what minds do, and rest will help it find its spaciousness again. Tonight, you don't need to fix everything. You only need to make room for rest and let the nervous system remember how to soften. That is enough for now. Sleep is also a quiet regulator of the body's stress response, and the effect can feel almost invisible until it's missing. When you are rested, the nervous system tends to sit closer to neutral, and the day's frictions don't grip as tightly. One way to picture this is as a volume knob. Sleep helps keep that knob lower, so ordinary challenges stay in the range of ordinary. When sleep is short, the knob turns up. Sounds feel sharper, decisions feel heavier, and your mind may begin scanning for problems the way a light sweeps across a dark room. This scanning is not a character flaw. It is the brain protecting you when resources are limited. In the language of neuroscience, sleep helps the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain involved in planning, inhibition, and perspective, work smoothly with deeper emotional systems. When that cooperation is strong, you can feel a feeling without being pulled under by it. When that cooperation is weaker, the same feeling can feel urgent, as if it must be solved immediately. This is why, late at night, worries can become unusually persuasive. The thinking brain is tired, the alarm system is louder, and the future can look more certain than it really is. It's also why morning can bring relief without any new information. With sleep, the system rebalances. It becomes easier to hold a worry at arm's length, to see it as one thought among many. In REM sleep, stress chemistry in the brain shifts in a way that may support emotional processing. Researchers often note that certain stress-related signals are reduced in REM, creating a safer internal climate for revisiting emotion. You can think of it as rehearsing a difficult song, but with the volume turned down. The melody remains, but it no longer shakes the walls. Over many nights, this gentle rehearsal can help difficult memories lose their sting. The events stay in your story, but your body learns that recalling them does not require full alarm. This is one reason steady sleep supports resilience. It doesn't remove stress from life, but it can reduce the way stress lives inside you. Tonight, if something has been weighing on you, you don't need to solve it here. You can let sleep do its part quietly, in the background, while you rest. And even if you are awake right now, you can begin practicing what sleep will strengthen: a slower breath, a softer jaw, and the reminder that not everything needs an answer in the dark. You might notice this in your own life when you wake after a solid night and think, almost with surprise, that the same responsibilities look manageable. Nothing changed on the outside, but your internal posture changed. The brain has more room, and in that room you can choose a calmer response. So, if you feel emotional tonight, let that be information, not a verdict. It may simply mean your system is asking for rest, and rest is already on its way. Now that we've met the stages and the signals, we can return to a question that comforts many people. Why do we wake at all? The idea of sleeping through the night sounds ideal, but biology is more nuanced. Most nights include brief awakenings. Some are seconds long, some longer, and most are forgotten. They often happen at the edges of cycles, when the brain is already closer to the surface. In a sleep lab, these transitions show up as small shifts in pattern, like a boat rising briefly with a swell. Your body may adjust position, swallow, or check the room without forming a clear thought. This is normal. In fact, it can be protective, a tiny systems check that keeps you responsive to important changes. What turns these awakenings into a problem is usually not the awakening itself, but what follows. If you meet the moment with bright light, time checking, or mental debate, the brain receives a message. It is daytime now. Alertness rises quickly, because alertness is what brains are built to do when something seems important. But if you meet the moment with neutrality, the brain often drifts back as naturally as it drifted out. You keep the room dim. You avoid clocks. You let your body stay heavy, and you let your mind remain unentertained. A simple phrase can help, not as a spell, but as a posture. This is a normal pause. This is a crossing point. Nothing is required. If thoughts appear, you don't need to chase them. You can let them pass like distant traffic. Present, but not personal. You can also use a physical anchor. Feel the contact points where your body meets the bed. Notice the temperature of the air at the nostrils. Let the exhale be longer than the inhale, the way a sigh lengthens when you stop holding it back. The goal is not to force sleep. The goal is to stop feeding wakefulness. And when wakefulness is no longer fed, sleep often returns on its own. Over time, this approach becomes training. The brain learns that night awakenings are boring and safe, and it stops treating them as emergencies. That learning is slow, but it is real. It is the kind of learning the body trusts. If you do need to move, move slowly, like someone in a museum after hours. Keep your eyes soft and keep the light as low as you can. The aim is to avoid giving the brain novelty, because novelty is the fastest invitation to wakefulness. When you return to bed, return with the feeling that you are resuming something, not restarting. A cycle continues, even if you surfaced for a moment. Some people find it helps to keep the eyes only half open, avoiding sharp focus. Sleep is encouraged by softness, in light, in attention, in expectation. You are not persuading yourself with arguments. You are simply removing friction and allowing the brain to do what it already knows. Sometimes, though, wakefulness feels more persistent, and the night begins to feel like a place where effort lives. This is where insomnia often grows, not from one bad night, but from a repeating pattern of struggle. Many sleep researchers describe insomnia as an issue of hyperarousal. The brain becomes too practiced at staying on. At first, that on state may be triggered by something understandable: stress, grief, travel, pain, schedule changes. Then, even after the original trigger fades, the brain remembers the pattern. It starts anticipating trouble, and anticipation is a powerful alarm signal. You lie down and begin monitoring. Am I sleepy enough? How long has it been? What if tomorrow's ruined? These questions are human, but they recruit the very networks that keep you alert, planning, calculating, protecting. Sleep doesn't respond well to calculation. Sleep responds to safety. This is why trying hard to sleep can backfire. Effort raises arousal, and arousal pushes sleep away. A gentler approach is to shift the goal from sleep to rest. You offer your body stillness, low light, and comfort, and you allow sleep to arrive as a side effect. In therapy, this is sometimes framed as letting go of performance. The night is not an exam. The bed is not a scoreboard. If you are awake, you can still be resting. And light sleep can still be real sleep, even if it feels thin. Many people with insomnia underestimate how much they slept because the mind stayed watchful. That watchfulness is not proof of failure. It is a habit the brain learned, often for good reasons. What is learned can be unlearned, not by force, but by repetition. Consistent wake time, a calm wind down, low stimulation in the night. And, when needed, stepping out of bed briefly in dim light if you are wide awake, so the bed stays associated with sleep rather than struggle. These are small acts of retraining, and retraining is slow but steady. It is like guiding a nervous animal back toward trust, one quiet evening at a time. Tonight, whatever your history with sleep, you can begin with kindness. Kindness lowers arousal, and lowered arousal is where sleep begins. One gentle technique is to give worries a container earlier in the evening. A short list on paper, tomorrow's tasks, the one or two concerns you'll address in daylight. This tells the brain, I have not forgotten, which can reduce its need to rehearse at midnight. Then, when the thought returns at night, you can point it back to the page and let it wait there. It's a small boundary, but boundaries create safety. If you wake and the mind begins performing, you can try a reversal. Give yourself permission to be awake, gently, without punishment. Often, the moment the fight ends, the body relaxes. And relaxation is the ground where sleep can return, quietly, without applause. If sleep is a system, then bedtime is not a single moment. It is a gradual handoff from day to night. The handoff works best when it is predictable. Predictability is calming to the brain because it reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is a form of alertness. This is why routines matter, not because you must be strict, but because your nervous system learns sequences. When the same sequence repeats, the body begins preparing ahead of time, like a traveler who recognizes familiar streets. A wind down can be simple. Dim the lights, lower the volume of the world. Let your tasks stop multiplying. Choose one or two gentle activities that don't demand sharp attention. A warm drink without caffeine. A few pages of a calm book. A shower that signals closure. A short stretch that releases the shoulders and jaw. These are not hacks. They are cues. Light, especially, is a cue the brain takes seriously. Bright overhead lighting can keep the clock in day mode. A softer lamp can begin the transition. Screens combine light with mental engagement, which is why they can be doubly stimulating. If you can't avoid screens, you can make them dimmer, warmer, and less emotionally activating. The goal is to make evening feel unmistakably like evening. Another cue is temperature. A slightly cooler room supports sleep onset for many people. So does breathable bedding. So does the feeling that your body can stop performing. Even your posture matters. If your shoulders stay raised, the body reads readiness. If they drop, the body reads safety. One of the most reliable cues is a consistent wake time. It anchors the circadian clock, and it allows sleep pressure to build and release in a steadier arc. Bedtime can then become more flexible because the clock is stable. You do not need perfection. You only need consistency often enough that the system can recognize the pattern. Tonight, if you want a single quiet practice, choose the exhale. Let it lengthen as if you are gently fogging a mirror. Longer exhales activate a calming branch of the nervous system, signaling that the world is not urgent. In that signal, sleep often finds a clearer path. And if it doesn't arrive quickly, you are still practicing the conditions that invite it. That practice counts. You can also treat your bed like a signal, not a workspace. If you often scroll, email, or argue with yourself under the covers, the brain learns that the bed is a place for activation. If you reserve it mostly for sleep and quiet intimacy, it becomes a cue for letting go. This change can take time, but it is one of the simplest forms of retraining, and it works because the brain loves association. A routine can be as short as 10 minutes, as long as it is repeatable. Think of it like a lullaby. Over time, the brain starts responding earlier, preparing for sleep before you even notice. That preparation is the gift of routine. Now we can gather what we've learned so far into a simple picture you can carry lightly. Sleep is guided by timing and pressure. Timing comes from the circadian clock, which listens to light, meals, and routine. Pressure comes from wakefulness itself, building through the day and easing through the night. The stages of sleep are not a ladder you climb once. They are a cycle you ride again and again, moving from light settling to deep restoration to dreaming integration. Awakenings are often part of that architecture, especially at the edges of cycles. They are not always problems. They become problems when the brain is taught to treat them as emergencies. Kindness and boredom are surprisingly powerful tools here. Low light, minimal movement, no clock checking, a gentle phrase, a longer exhale. These are ways of telling the nervous system nothing is required. And when nothing is required, sleep becomes more likely. If you struggle with insomnia, it can help to remember that insomnia is often hyperarousal, not brokenness. The brain learned to stay on, and learning can be reshaped. Small, consistent signals matter more than big, rare efforts. Morning light to anchor the clock, a steady wake time to set the rhythm, a calmer evening to let melatonin rise, a cooler room and softer light to make night obvious, and a wind-down routine that feels like closing the day's door gently, not slamming it. None of this needs to become another project. The point is not optimization. The point is cooperation. Your body already knows how to sleep. It has done it through every chapter of your life, even during difficult seasons. Tonight, we are simply helping it remember the path. In the next part of our journey, we'll look at the everyday influences that can quietly shape the night: caffeine, alcohol, naps, movement, and the timing of modern life. Not as rules, but as levers. Levers you can hold lightly, adjusting them a little at a time in the direction of more ease. For now, let the knowledge settle. Let your eyes rest. Let your breath slow. And let the night feel less like a test and more like a place your body belongs. And remember, the goal of this episode is not to make you think more about sleep. It is to make sleep feel less mysterious, so your mind can stop negotiating with it. When you understand the system, you can trust it. Trust reduces effort. Effort reduces arousal. And reduced arousal is the soft doorway sleep prefers. So we continue gently, with curiosity that never asks you to stay awake. In a way, sleep science is an invitation to stop personalizing the night. Many of your wakeful moments have mechanical explanations, and when a moment is mechanical, it becomes less frightening. You can meet it with calm and let the system continue. Alcohol can feel like an easy doorway into sleep, and that is part of its charm. For many people, a drink softens the edges of the evening, quiets the mind, and brings drowsiness quickly. But the sleep that follows is not always the sleep the body would have chosen on its own. Alcohol is a sedative at first, and then, as the night goes on and the body metabolizes it, it can become disruptive. In the first part of the night, alcohol can increase the feeling of heaviness, making it easier to fall asleep. It may also increase certain kinds of deep sleep early on, but later, as levels fall, the nervous system often rebounds. Sleep can become lighter, more fragmented, and more sensitive to noise and waking. This is why some people fall asleep quickly after drinking, then wake at 3 or 4 a.m. with a bright, restless mind. The body is not punishing you. It is rebalancing chemistry. Alcohol can also affect REM sleep, often reducing it in the first half of the night and shifting it later. Dreaming may return more intensely as the night goes on, or dreams may feel scattered and less restorative. Breathing can change as well. Alcohol relaxes muscles, including those that help keep the airway open, which can worsen snoring and sleep apnea in people who are prone. Even without apnea, the night can feel less smooth. You may wake feeling as if you slept, but not as if you rested. None of this is meant to turn alcohol into a villain. It is simply information. If a drink is part of your culture, your social life, or your evening pleasure, you can hold that without guilt. Sleep science is not here to shame you. It is here to explain why some mornings feel different. If you want a gentler night, the simplest lever is timing. Finishing earlier gives the body more time to metabolize alcohol before the deepest parts of sleep arrive. Another lever is quantity. A smaller amount often reduces the rebound effect later. And another lever is hydration and food, which can change the speed of absorption and soften the physiological swing. Sometimes the best question is not, should I drink? But, what do I want my night to feel like? On nights when rest matters most, you might choose a calmer path. On nights when celebration matters, you might accept a lighter sleep as a fair trade. Either way, you are not broken. You are simply living inside a body that keeps careful records. Tonight, as you settle, you can let this knowledge be gentle. If your sleep has been fragmented after drinking, it may not be anxiety or failure. It may be timing and metabolism doing what they always do. And when you understand that, the night becomes less personal and more workable. A workable night is a calmer night, and calm is where sleep prefers to grow. Naps are a small mystery in modern life. Sometimes they feel like medicine, and sometimes they feel like theft, as if the nap stole from the night. Both experiences can be true, because naps interact with the same sleep pressure we've been following all evening. Remember adenosine, the slow build of sleepiness through the day. A nap can lower that pressure, which is why you may wake feeling refreshed. But lowering pressure also means there is less pull toward sleep at bedtime, especially if the nap is long or late. In sleep science, naps are often described by two main variables: length and timing. A brief nap, often around 10 to 20 minutes, tends to keep you in lighter stages of sleep. It can improve alertness and mood without dropping you into deep sleep, which is one reason it can feel clean and easy. A longer nap, closer to 90 minutes, can include a fuller cycle, sometimes reaching deeper sleep and then rising again. That kind of nap can be restorative, especially if you are sleep deprived, but it can also leave you groggy if you wake from deep sleep. That grogginess is sleep inertia, the same heaviness we mentioned earlier, and it's not a sign that naps are bad. It's just a sign you woke from a deeper layer. Timing matters too. Many people have a natural circadian dip in the early afternoon, a soft valley of alertness. A nap taken there is often easier and less disruptive than a nap taken late in the day, when your clock is already beginning to prepare for night. If you nap at 6 or 7 p.m., you may feel awake at 11, not because you are stubborn, but because your sleep pressure was released close to bedtime. So naps become a lever you can use with kindness. If you're exhausted, a short nap can be a gentle bridge to evening. If you're protecting nighttime sleep, a shorter and earlier nap often helps. And if you can't nap at all, that's fine too. Some bodies treat naps like a small reset button, and others treat them like jet lag. Neither is wrong. If you are experimenting, keep the experiment calm. Try one short nap. Try a slightly earlier nap. Notice what happens without judging yourself for the result. Because the point is not to control sleep with strictness. The point is to learn your system's preferences, the way you learn how much water your plant needs. Tonight, if you're listening and thinking about naps, let the thought drift. Even a nap you regret can be turned into information, not a verdict. Your body already knows how to balance pressure and rest. You are simply giving it a little more clarity about the levers you have, should you want to use them. And in that clarity, bedtime can feel less like guessing and more like returning to something familiar. Movement is one of the oldest sleep aids, not because it knocks you out, but because it helps the day feel complete. When you move, you spend energy, you raise body temperature, you work muscles, and you build sleep pressure in an honest way. Exercise can also reduce stress reactivity over time, giving the nervous system more flexibility, which makes evenings calmer. People often ask, what's the best time to exercise for sleep? The gentle answer is the time you can do consistently. Consistency tends to matter more than the perfect hour because the body learns patterns, and patterns become cues. That said, timing can change how exercise feels at night. Hard exercise late in the evening can be stimulating for some people, especially if it raises core temperature and adrenaline close to bedtime. For others, evening movement is exactly what releases the day and helps them sleep. Bodies differ. Your clock, your stress level, and your baseline fitness all influence the response. A useful way to think about it is intensity. Light movement in the evening, a walk, gentle stretching, slow yoga, often support sleep by lowering tension without spiking arousal. Higher intensity training may still be fine, but it may work best earlier for people who feel wired afterward. If you notice that your mind feels bright after late exercise, you can try shifting it earlier by one small step, or adding a longer wind down afterward. Hydration and food matter here too. If you finish a workout and then eat a heavy meal close to bed, digestion can keep the system more active. A lighter, earlier meal can make the transition smoother. Sleep also improves exercise. After a good night, coordination is steadier, reaction time is quicker, and the perception of effort is lower. After a short night, workouts can feel harder, and motivation can feel thinner. This creates another loop. Movement supports sleep, and sleep supports movement. The loop doesn't need to be perfect to be helpful. Even small, regular movement can improve sleep quality over weeks, not by magic, but by biology responding to repeated signals. If you can take a walk in daylight, you get a bonus. Daylight anchors the circadian clock, and movement adds healthy sleep pressure, a double message that the day is for activity. And if you can't, that's fine. Indoor movement still counts. The body is not picky about where you move, only that you do. Tonight, let exercise be a comforting idea rather than a task. Your body is designed to sleep after it has lived, and movement is one of the simplest ways of telling the brain quietly that the day has been lived enough. Tomorrow's steps can be small, and they will still matter. Even 10 minutes is a signal. If you've ever wondered why some people spring awake at dawn while others come alive late at night, you're meeting the idea of chronotype. Chronotype is your natural tendency toward earlier or later sleep and wake times, shaped by biology, light sensitivity, and age. People sometimes call them larks and owls, but the truth is more of a spectrum, with many gentle variations in between. In early adulthood, many people drift later. In childhood, many drift earlier. As we age, the clock can shift again, often earlier, though not always. These shifts can feel personal, but they are often physiological. Your circadian clock has a preferred timing, like a piano that naturally resonates at certain notes. Society, meanwhile, has its own timing. School bells, office hours, morning meetings. When your biology and your obligations align, sleep can feel easy. When they don't, you may feel as if you are constantly traveling across time zones without leaving home. This mismatch is sometimes called social jet lag. It can show up as tired mornings, late-night alertness, and weekends spent catching up, which can then make Monday feel like another flight. Again, not a moral issue, just timing. Understanding chronotype can reduce self-criticism. If you struggle to fall asleep early, it may not be that you lack discipline. It may be that your clock is set later, and you're asking it to behave like someone else's clock. You can still shape your rhythm, but you shape it gently. Morning light is one of the strongest tools for shifting the clock earlier. Even 10 or 15 minutes outdoors soon after waking can help anchor timing over days and weeks. Evening light, especially bright screens, can shift the clock later. So dimming The evening can help your biology feel night sooner. Meal timing and activity timing matter too, but light is the loudest signal. If you're an owl in a lark world, the goal isn't to erase who you are. The goal is to build a steady routine that respects your biology while meeting your life. Sometimes that means protecting sleep opportunity by moving bedtime gradually earlier. Sometimes it means protecting morning routines so they aren't punishing. And sometimes it simply means replacing shame with strategy. Tonight, let your chronotype be a soft piece of self-knowledge. It's not a label, it's a clue. It tells you why certain schedules feel like friction and why certain evenings feel easier. When you understand the clock you have, you stop fighting the clock you don't. And that reduction in fight is by itself a small invitation to sleep. In the next part of our journey, we'll keep exploring everyday timing, age, travel, and the modern brightness that can make midnight feel like noon, unless you teach your home to become dusk again. Sleep changes across life, not because the system breaks, but because the body's needs and timing evolve. In childhood, sleep is often deeper and longer with more slow-wave sleep, as if the body is building itself brick by brick in the dark. Children can fall asleep quickly, wake early, and sometimes drop into deep sleep so fast that they seem unreachable, which is one reason they may be hard to wake and slow to respond at night. In adolescence, the circadian clock often shifts later, a biological drift that can make teenagers feel naturally sleepy later and naturally groggy early. This isn't only attitude or habit. It's timing, layered on top of school schedules that may still demand early mornings, which can create chronic sleep debt without anyone intending it. In adulthood, sleep becomes a little lighter on average, with more awakenings, and often a gradual reduction in deep sleep percentage over decades. That doesn't mean deep sleep disappears. It means the balance shifts, and the night may include more time in N2 and more frequent brief surfacing between cycles. As people age further, sleep can become more fragmented, and circadian timing may shift earlier for many, meaning sleepiness arrives earlier in the evening and waking arrives earlier in the morning. Some older adults also find that naps become more tempting, which can be helpful or disruptive depending on timing. Across all ages, one truth stays steady. The sleep system responds to regular cues. When routines remain stable, the body tends to adapt, even if the architecture changes. It also helps to remember that good sleep doesn't look identical for everyone. A child's night is not an adult's night. A young adult's clock is not a retiree's clock. And even within the same age group, biology varies. If you compare your sleep to someone else's, you may end up trying to live inside a body that isn't yours. A gentler approach is to notice what helps your own system. Do you do better with earlier dinners? Do you do better with a cooler room? Do you do better with morning light? Do you do better with shorter naps? These are not rules, they are discoveries. And when you discover what your body prefers, you can stop fighting it. Sleep science, at its kindest, replaces the word should with the phrase tends to. This tends to help. This tends to disrupt. This tends to make the night smoother. Then you choose what fits your life. Tonight, if you're listening and thinking about the years ahead, let the thought be calming. Sleep will keep changing, and you will keep adapting. The goal is not to preserve the sleep of childhood forever. The goal is to keep giving your nervous system the signals it recognizes as night, dimness, steadiness, and safety. And in that steady night, whatever your age, sleep will still do its work. Dreams are one of the most familiar parts of sleep, and also one of the most variable. Some nights you wake with a whole storyline, faces and places that feel strangely real. Other nights you wake with nothing at all, as if the mind spent the night in quiet blankness. Both can be normal. Dream recall depends on timing, because you're more likely to remember a dream if you wake during or near REM sleep, when the dream is closer to the surface. If you wake from deep sleep, you may remember little, not because you didn't dream, but because the brain was in a slower mode, and the transition to wakefulness was farther. Stress can affect dream content. So can fever, medication, alcohol, and sleep deprivation. When the nervous system is on edge, dreams can become more vivid, more emotionally charged, or more repetitive, as if the brain is circling a theme it wants to resolve. Sometimes, after several short nights, REM sleep can rebound, meaning the brain spends more time in REM when it finally gets the chance. That rebound can make dreaming feel intense, not because something is wrong, but because the system is catching up. Dreams are also shaped by memory. The brain pulls from recent experiences, older memories, and background emotions, and it blends them without needing to follow logic. You may meet a childhood friend in a city you've never visited, and the dream still feels coherent in its own language. Many scientists think dreams are part of how the brain integrates information, making connections that waking life might not make quickly. Others emphasize emotion processing, where the brain revisits feelings in a safer, internal climate. And others see dreams as a byproduct of brain activity, consciousness, riding along as the system works. These ideas can coexist. The key point is gentle. Dreaming is common, and its presence or absence on a given morning is not a grade. You don't need to interpret every dream. If a dream is pleasant, you can let it leave a soft warmth. If a dream is unpleasant, you can let it dissolve like mist in daylight. One practical detail helps here. When you wake from a vivid dream, your body may still be carrying the emotional tone, even if you know the dream wasn't real. That's because emotion is stored in physiology, not only in thought. A slow exhale can help. So can placing a hand on the chest, feeling the steady pressure, and letting the nervous system relearn that the room is safe. If you want to remember dreams, you can write them down quickly after waking because memory for dreams fades fast. If you don't want to remember them, you can do the opposite. Avoid rehearsing them. Keep your attention on morning routines and let the day overwrite the fragments. Dreams will come and go like weather, and your sleep will still be doing its work beneath them, steady as a tide, whether you remember the waves or not. Sometimes dreams are not gentle, and the night can bring images that feel sharp. Nightmares are vivid dreams that create fear or distress and often wake you fully, sometimes with a racing heart and a sense of alarm. They commonly occur during REM sleep, which is why they may be remembered clearly. Night terrors are different. They tend to happen earlier in the night, often during deep NREM sleep, and they can look dramatic from the outside. A person may sit up, cry out, sweat, or appear terrified. But in a night terror, the sleeper is often not fully awake, may not be consolable, and usually remembers little or nothing afterward. It can be unsettling to witness, but it doesn't always mean the mind is replaying a specific fear. It can be the nervous system misfiring during a deep sleep transition. Both nightmares and night terrors can be more common during stress, illness, sleep deprivation, irregular schedules, and sometimes with certain medications. In children, night terrors can occur and then fade with age as sleep architecture changes. In adults, persistent night terrors are less common, but they can still happen, especially when sleep is disrupted. Nightmares can also increase when the brain is processing intense emotion, which is why they may cluster during anxious seasons. The helpful response, when possible, is gentle and boring. For nightmares, if you wake, you can orient yourself slowly. Notice the room. Notice the weight of the blanket. Notice that the threat is not present. Then return to calm cues, low light, minimal movement, slow breathing. If you turn on bright lights, check messages, or start problem solving, the brain may stay awake. For night terrors, the usual advice is not to force full waking unless safety requires it, because waking can prolong confusion. Instead, protect the environment. Keep the person safe from falling. Speak softly and allow the episode to pass. In all cases, protecting total sleep time matters. Sleep deprivation can make parasomnias and nightmares more likely, so a steady schedule can reduce frequency. A calming wind down can help as well because it lowers baseline arousal. Some people benefit from a simple technique called imagery rehearsal, where you gently rewrite a recurring nightmare during the day, changing the ending to something safe. The brain can sometimes adopt the new script over time, reducing recurrence. This isn't magic. It's learning, and learning is something the sleeping brain does well. If nightmares happen once in a while, you don't need to treat them as a sign of damage. They can be a byproduct of stress, a heavy meal, a hot room, or simply a vivid REM period. If they are frequent and distressing, support can help, because you deserve nights that feel safer. Beyond dreams, there are other strange behaviors that can appear at night, often called parasomnias. These include sleepwalking, sleep-talking, confusional arousals, and, for some people, acting out dreams. Many parasomnias happen when the brain is partly asleep and partly awake, as if different systems are running at different speeds. In sleepwalking, for example, a person may sit up, stand, or even walk, while still being largely in deep sleep. The eyes may be open, but awareness is limited. Speech may be mumbled or nonsensical. The person may not respond normally and usually remembers little afterward. This can be more common in children and often decreases with age, though it can persist. Sleep talking is common and usually harmless. It can happen in any stage, and it often increases during stress, sleep deprivation, or irregular schedules. Confusional arousals are moments when someone wakes partially and seems confused, irritable, or disoriented, like a mind caught between layers. These episodes can look dramatic, but they can be brief and forgotten. Then there is a different category that tends to occur during REM sleep. REM sleep behavior disorder, where the usual muscle inhibition of REM is reduced. In that case, a person may move or act out dreams more visibly, and this can be a safety concern, especially if movements are sudden. This is less common and deserves medical attention if suspected, particularly in older adults, because it can be associated with neurological conditions. For many parasomnias, the most reliable triggers are simple: sleep deprivation, alcohol, stress, fever, and disrupted schedules. When the night is fragmented, the brain makes more transitions between stages, and transitions are where mixed states can occur. So, the most practical support is often boring and steady. Protect total sleep time. Keep schedules more consistent. Reduce late alcohol. Lower evening stimulation. And make the sleep environment safer if episodes occur. If someone sleepwalks, the priority is safety. Clear obstacles. Lock doors if needed. Avoid bunk beds. Gently guide rather than startle. Trying to wake them up forcefully can increase confusion. The goal is to prevent injury, not to teach a lesson. If you live alone and are concerned, simple precautions can still help. Keeping pathways clear, removing sharp hazards, and speaking with a clinician if episodes are frequent. Often, the most reassuring fact is that these events are usually not signs of a mind falling apart. They are signs of a sleep system crossing wires briefly, usually during transitions, often under stress. It can help to treat parasomnias the way you'd treat a thunderstorm. You don't argue with thunder. You make the house safe, you wait it out, and you notice what conditions make it more likely. Then you adjust the conditions. Tonight, you don't need to become an expert. Breathing is so automatic that we rarely think about it, which is why sleep-related breathing problems can hide in plain sight. Sleep apnea is one of the most common And at a high level, it means that breathing repeatedly pauses or becomes shallow during sleep. In obstructive sleep apnea, the airway narrows or collapses temporarily, often when muscles relax, and the brain briefly arouses the body to reopen the airway. These arousals can be so short you don't remember them, but they can fragment sleep dozens of times per hour. The result can be a night that looks long on the clock, but feels thin in the body. People with sleep apnea may snore loudly, gasp, or choke, but not everyone does. Daytime fatigue, morning headaches, dry mouth, poor concentration, and irritability can be clues because the brain never fully settles into smooth cycles. Sleep apnea can also increase cardiovascular strain over time because oxygen levels fluctuate and the body keeps being nudged into alertness. There is also central sleep apnea, where the brain's breathing signal temporarily pauses, which is less common and often linked to other medical conditions. The point tonight is not diagnosis. The point is awareness, because some sleep problems are not solved by better routines alone. If the airway is repeatedly collapsing, the body will keep waking itself for safety no matter how calm the bedtime is. Treatment can be life-changing for people who need it. The most well-known treatment is CPAP, which keeps the airway open with gentle air pressure. Some people use oral appliances. Some benefit from weight changes, positional changes, or treatment of nasal obstruction. In children, enlarged tonsils can be a factor. There are multiple paths, and a clinician can guide the right one. If you suspect sleep apnea in yourself or someone you love, it can be worth taking seriously, not with fear, but with practicality. Because when apnea is treated, the night becomes quieter. Cycles become smoother. The brain spends less time on emergency breathing checks and more time on restoration, memory, and calm. Even if you don't have apnea, breathing still matters for sleep. A blocked nose, allergies, or a very dry room can subtly increase nighttime arousal. Simple supports can help. Hydration, treating allergies, using a humidifier if the air is dry, and choosing a sleep position that feels open. Tonight, we hold the broader idea gently. Sleep is not only in the mind. It is in the airway, the chest, the rhythm of oxygen, and the body's sense of safety. When breathing is smooth, sleep can become deeper without effort. When breathing is disrupted, the body will keep surfacing. And that surfacing is not weakness. It is protection. Restless legs can feel like one of the strangest barriers to sleep because it isn't only in the mind. It is an urge in the body, a pulling sensation often in the legs that improves with movement and worsens with stillness. People describe it as crawling, aching, tingling, or an inner restlessness that doesn't match the calm of the room. It often appears in the evening or at night, right when you are trying to settle. In sleep science, this is called restless legs syndrome, and it can also be accompanied by periodic limb movements during sleep. small repeated leg jerks that may fragment sleep without full waking. The key thing to remember is that it is real. It is not a lack of discipline. It is a neurological and sensory phenomenon, and it can be influenced by physiology. One factor often discussed is iron. Iron plays a role in dopamine function, and dopamine is involved in movement and sensory regulation. Low iron stores, even without anemia, can increase restless legs in some people, which is why clinicians sometimes check ferritin levels when symptoms are persistent. Restless legs can also be influenced by pregnancy, kidney disease, certain medications, and stress. Caffeine and alcohol can worsen it for some people, especially later in the day. Sleep deprivation can worsen it too, creating a frustrating loop. Poor sleep increases symptoms, and symptoms reduce sleep. The most practical starting point is to treat the night as a system, not a battle. If you have occasional restlessness, gentle movement in the evening can help. A short walk, light stretching, calf release, or a warm bath can reduce the urge to move later. Some people find relief with heat or cold packs or with massage because sensory input can calm the signal. If symptoms are frequent or severe, professional help is worth it because there are effective treatments, and you deserve nights that feel easier. Tonight, if you ever notice that restless feeling, meet it with the same kindness we've practiced. Don't blame yourself. Don't force stillness as punishment. Instead, respond gently. Move a little. Stretch softly. Then return to bed with low light and low urgency. The goal is to keep arousal low, even while you address the body's request for movement. Sleep does not require perfect stillness. It requires a system that feels safe. And when the body is heard rather than fought, it often becomes calmer. If you're listening and wondering whether you have restless legs, the simple clue is timing and relief. It tends to show up at rest, especially in the evening, and it tends to ease when you move. That pattern is different from cramps or soreness. If it resonates, treat it as information, not diagnosis, and consider discussing it with a clinician if it interferes with sleep. Because sometimes improving sleep isn't only about routine. Sometimes it's about removing a physical urge that keeps the body from letting go. Now we come to a modern influence that is so common it feels invisible. Screens. Screens are not only light, they are attention, and attention is one of the strongest signals of daytime. Your circadian clock uses light as a time cue, and screens can deliver bright, blue-weighted light close to the eyes, telling the brain it's still day. At the same time, the content on a screen can activate the mind. Messages, news, social feeds, even a compelling show. These are all forms of novelty, and novelty is alerting. So, screens can affect sleep in two ways at once. They delay the clock's sense of night, and they raise cognitive arousal. This is not a moral story. It's not that screens are bad and you are weak. It's that the brain evolved to treat light and novelty as signals to stay awake. In earlier centuries, night was naturally dim, and most evenings were quiet. Now, the evening can be bright and full of stimulation, and the brain does what brains do. It adapts to the environment. If you want an easier night, you don't need to ban screens completely. You can use gentler rules. Make the last hour calmer. Dim brightness. Use warmer settings. Avoid emotionally charged content late at night. Choose something boring and predictable, not something that keeps pulling you to the next clip, the next message, the next headline. The goal is not to remove technology. The goal is to teach your brain that your home has a dusk. A simple trick is to change the lighting around the screen because contrast matters. A bright screen in a dark room is a loud signal. A dimmer screen in a softly lit room is quieter. Another trick is to move screens farther away. A television across the room is less biologically loud than a phone inches from the eyes. Even better is to switch from interactive content to passive content, scrolling, texting, and searching. Keep the brain in decision mode. Listening to an audiobook, a calm story, or gentle music can be less activating because it reduces choice and reduces novelty. And if you do find yourself scrolling late, you don't need shame. Shame increases arousal. A better move is curiosity. Notice how your body feels after 20 minutes. Notice whether your mind is brighter or quieter. Then choose your next step gently. Sleep science is not about perfect control. It's about recognizing what signals the brain reads as day and offering more night signals when you want the night to arrive. So tonight, if a screen was part of your evening, let it be one factor among many. You can still dim the room. You can still slow the breath. You can still make the next 10 minutes quieter. The nervous system responds to the present, and the present can always be softened. Bedtime routines can sound like discipline, but the deeper truth is that routines are conditioning. The brain loves sequences. When the same sequence repeats, the nervous system begins preparing ahead of time, as if it knows what comes next. You don't have to think, now I will relax. The body starts relaxing on its own because the pattern has become familiar. This is why a wind-down ritual can be more powerful than a single technique. The ritual becomes the technique. A routine can be short. 10 minutes of dim light and quiet can be enough. What matters is that it is repeatable. The same few steps, in the same order, most nights. Perhaps you wash your face, brush your teeth, and then you lower the lights. Perhaps you make a caffeine-free tea. Perhaps you read 2 pages of something gentle, not because you need to finish, but because the act itself signals closure. Perhaps you put your phone on charge in another corner of the room, like setting a tool down after work. Then you return to bed with fewer open loops. Some people benefit from what's called a buffer zone, a small period where no new tasks enter, no new emails, no new planning, no new debates. This buffer zone doesn't solve life. It simply stops life from expanding into the night. Your nervous system reads that as safety. You can also use sound as part of routine, a consistent rain track, a fan, a soft ambient tone. Steady sound can become a cue that the world is now boring and predictable. And boring at night is beautiful. Another cue is scent. A consistent, subtle scent, like lavender or a familiar soap, can become associated with bedtime over weeks, not because the scent has magic, but because association has power. The same is true for texture. The feel of certain pajamas, the same blanket, the same pillow position, these become signals to the body that it is allowed to let go. If your mind tends to race, routines can include a small closing ritual for thoughts. A short note, tomorrow's priority, tomorrow's first step, and anything you're worried you'll forget. This gives the mind permission to stop rehearsing. Then at night, when the thought returns, you can say, "It's on the page," and you can let it wait there. Over time, the routine becomes a bridge. Day on one side, night on the other. And you don't have to leap. You simply walk across, step by step. Tonight, you don't need a perfect routine. But if you want one, keep it simple. Choose 3 or 4 steps that feel calming, not demanding. Repeat them until your body starts responding before you even notice. That response is the goal. The routine becomes a lullaby your nervous system recognizes, and recognition is one of the most reliable doors into sleep. Relaxation sounds like a concept, but in the body, it is physiology. It is a shift in the nervous system, away from fight or flight and toward rest and digest. A simple way to invite that shift is through breathing. Not forcing, not counting obsessively, but gently changing the ratio. A longer exhale tends to signal safety. It tells the body there is no need for fast action. You can try breathing in through the nose for a comfortable count, then letting the exhale be slightly longer, like a soft sigh. You're not trying to get oxygen. You're trying to send a message. Another pathway is muscle tone. Many people carry tension in the jaw, shoulders, and hands even when lying down. If you release the jaw, the body often follows. If you let the shoulders drop a fraction, the chest feels less guarded. If you soften the hands, the rest of the body feels less ready to grip the world. Progressive muscle relaxation uses this idea. You gently tense and then release different muscle groups, teaching the body the contrast between effort and letting go. Some people find it helps because it gives the mind a simple job that isn't stimulating. Others prefer a softer approach, just scanning the body and noticing where tension is hiding. Either works. The aim is the same, Lower arousal. You can also use attention. Attention can be sharp, like a spotlight, or soft, like a lantern. At night, a lantern is kinder. Instead of focusing tightly on a worry, you let attention widen to include the whole body, the whole room, the whole quiet. Wide attention reduces urgency. It makes thoughts feel less like emergencies and more like passing weather. Sound can support relaxation too. Slow, repetitive sounds, rain, ocean waves, soft ambient tones can synchronize breathing and reduce the brain's need to monitor the environment. Touch matters as well. A hand on the chest or stomach can create a grounding sensation. The nervous system responds to steady pressure. It is one reason weighted blankets help some people, not because of magic weight, but because pressure can feel like safety. Temperature, again, plays a role. A cool room with warm bedding can feel like a nest. The air is night. The blanket is comfort. That contrast can invite relaxation. None of these require perfection. They are small invitations. The body either accepts or it doesn't, and if it doesn't, you remain gentle. Gentleness itself is relaxing. If you have ever tried to relax and felt annoyed that you weren't relaxing, you felt the paradox. Relaxation doesn't respond to demand. It responds to permission. So tonight, if you choose one thing, choose permission. Permission to be awake without panic. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to let the day be unfinished. And in that permission, the nervous system often shifts quietly, the way a room grows calm when someone stops shouting. A racing mind can feel like the last guard at the gate, keeping sleep outside. Thoughts arrive as if they have been waiting for silence to begin. Lists, scenes, conversations, predictions, regrets. It can feel as if your brain saved its loudest material for the one time you asked it to be quiet. But the mind isn't being cruel. It is doing what minds do when the day finally stops distracting them. The goal is not to stop thoughts by force. Force keeps the mind engaged, and engagement is wakefulness. Instead, you create a different relationship with the thoughts. You treat them like passing objects, not commands. One gentle approach is externalization. If a thought feels sticky, you can write it down before bed. Not a whole essay, just a line. A reminder, a next step. This tells the brain you won't forget, which reduces the need to rehearse. If thoughts still come in bed, you can use a soft label. Planning, remembering, worrying. Then return to sensation, the breath, the weight of the body, the contact with the mattress. Labeling turns thoughts into categories rather than stories, and categories are less gripping. Another approach is to give the mind a neutral track, a simple mental image, a quiet place, a slow repetitive phrase. Not because the phrase is special, but because repetition is boring, and boring is calming. You might imagine walking through a familiar neighborhood at night. seeing the same streetlights, the same quiet windows. Or you might imagine counting breaths, not like a test, but like waves. If you reach 10, you begin again, without judgment. If the mind jumps away, you simply return. This is the whole practice. Return. Return again. Return gently. There's also a paradoxical technique some people find helpful. Permission to stay awake. You tell yourself, it's okay if I'm awake. The fight ends. And when the fight ends, arousal drops. Often, sleep arrives shortly after, like a guest who is waiting for the noise to stop. If the mind is truly wide awake for a long stretch, one calm option is to leave the bed briefly and do something quiet in dim light. Read a few pages. Sit in a chair. Listen to something gentle. Then, when sleepiness returns, come back to bed. This keeps the bed from becoming associated with struggle. Over time, these small choices retrain the system. Night becomes less dramatic. Awakenings become less threatening. Thoughts become less commanding. And sleep becomes more of what it was meant to be, a natural drift. Tonight, you don't need to solve your mind. You only need to stop treating it like an enemy. It's just a busy organ, learning slowly that the night is safe. And when it learns that, it quiets. As we near the end of our journey, it can help to step back and see the whole system at once. Sleep is not a single switch that flips. It is a coordinated sequence of signals, behaviors, and rhythms that the body repeats because it works. When you understand that, you stop taking the night so personally. If you can't fall asleep quickly, it may be timing, light, pressure, or arousal, not a flaw in you. If you wake in the night, it may be a normal crossing point between cycles, not a sign that your sleep is broken. If your dreams are vivid, it may be a long REM period, not a warning. If your morning feels foggy, it may be sleep inertia, not failure. The mind becomes calmer when it can explain the pattern without panic. That calm is not a trick. It is a biological shift because fear is arousal, and arousal is the opposite of sleep. So, one of the most useful things sleep science offers is a new story, not a story of pressure. I must sleep, but a story of cooperation. My body knows how to sleep, and I can help it. Help can be simple. A steady wake time to anchor the clock. Morning light to reinforce daytime. A calmer evening to invite melatonin. A cooler, dimmer room to make night obvious. A routine that repeats until the nervous system begins preparing automatically. And a gentler response to wakefulness so the brain stops treating the night as a problem-solving arena. In many ways, good sleep is boring. Boring is predictable. Predictable is safe. Safe is sleepy. This is why the most powerful changes are often the least dramatic. Not a total overhaul, not a strict regimen, just a few consistent cues held lightly, repeated often. And then the system begins to settle like a glass of water becoming clear when you stop shaking it. Tonight, If you're still awake, let this be the practice. Stop shaking the water. Let thoughts drift without engaging. Let the breath lengthen on the exhale. Let the room remain quiet and dim. Let your body rest even if sleep has not arrived yet. Rest is still valuable. Rest is still a signal of safety. And safety is the doorway sleep prefers. In the next moments, we'll gather the simplest practical levers into one calm plan, not as homework, but as a gentle map you can return to whenever the night feels confusing. A map doesn't force the journey. It simply makes the landscape familiar. So here is a simple sleep plan, built from what we've learned and meant to feel kind. Start with morning, if you can. See daylight soon after waking, even for a few minutes. Outdoor light is a strong message to the circadian clock. This is day. That message helps the clock predict night, and prediction is calming. Then keep the wake time relatively steady, especially on weekdays. Perfection isn't required, but large swings can confuse the clock and make bedtime feel uncertain. If you sleep in very late on weekends, Monday can feel like jet lag, because, in a way, it is. During the day, move your body in whatever way fits your life. Movement builds sleep pressure and releases stress chemistry. It doesn't need to be extreme. A walk counts. Stairs count. 10 minutes counts. Then consider caffeine as a timing tool. If it helps you, let it help. But try to keep it earlier so the brain can hear adenosine by night. A smaller dose later is often gentler than a large dose late. And remember, bodies differ. Your sensitivity is not weakness, it's wiring. As evening arrives, begin to create dusk. Dim lights, lower stimulation. Avoid bright overhead lighting if you can. If screens are part of your evening, make them dimmer and warmer, and choose content that doesn't spike emotion or attention. The goal is not purity. The goal is a quieter signal. Then build a wind-down routine. It can be short. 3 steps are enough. 1 step to close tasks. 1 step to soften the environment. 1 step to settle the body. The routine becomes a cue the nervous system learns. When you get into bed, treat the bed as a place for sleep, not for debate. If thoughts arrive, label them softly and return to sensation. If you wake, keep the moment boring. No clock checks. Low light. Minimal movement. Slow exhale. If you remain wide awake for a long stretch, step out briefly in dim light, do something quiet and uninteresting, then return when sleepiness returns. This protects the association between bed and sleep. And in all of this, the most important lever is your attitude. Not a forced positivity, just a reduction in fight. Sleep does not respond to demand. It responds to permission. So tell yourself, gently, it's okay if this takes time. That sentence lowers arousal more reliably than most techniques because it turns the night from a test into a place. And when the night becomes a place instead of a test, the body often returns to what it already knows how to do. Tonight, you can use this plan without effort. Choose one lever. Dim the room a little. Lengthen one exhale. Let the jaw soften. That is enough. And over time, enough becomes steady. And steady becomes sleep. There is one more idea that often helps people sleep better, and it's not a technique. It's the idea of letting go of the perfect night. Many people carry an invisible standard: 8 hours, uninterrupted, fast sleep onset, no waking, waking refreshed. When reality differs, anxiety grows, and anxiety is arousal. Arousal is the fuel that keeps the night awake. So the standard itself can become the problem. Real sleep is more flexible. Some nights are deep. Some nights are light. Some nights are broken into pieces. And still, the body gathers rest. It gathers it in the quiet minutes, in the shallow stages, in the short returns after waking. It is not all or nothing. It is accumulation. This is why, after a rough night, the best approach is often to protect the next night, rather than punish yourself. Don't chase sleep with naps that push bedtime later, unless you need them. Don't drown fatigue in late caffeine that creates a bright midnight. Don't interpret a bad night as prophecy. It is simply a bad night, and then it ends. One helpful phrase is, "This is temporary." Another is, "My body will take what it can." These phrases stop the mind from escalating. They stop the night from becoming a story. And when the story quiets, the body quiets. There is also the idea of sleep efficiency, which is simply the time you are asleep divided by the time you are in bed. If you spend long stretches awake in bed, the bed can start to feel like a place for wakefulness. This is why, if you are wide awake for a long time, it can be helpful to get up briefly in dim light and return when sleepiness returns. Not as punishment, as retraining. It keeps the bed associated with sleepiness rather than struggle. But again, no need to be strict. The tone is gentle. You are teaching your nervous system slowly what bedtime means. And learning happens through repetition more than through intensity. So be consistent where you can. Be flexible where you must. And be kind always. Kindness is not softness for its own sake. Kindness is a physiological tool. It lowers arousal. It reduces threat. It tells the body we are safe. And safety is the core requirement for sleep. Tonight, as you listen, you can let yourself be a little less vigilant. You can release the need to monitor. You can stop measuring the night. You can simply be in it. The world slows, and so do we. And in that slowing, the brain often finds its rhythm again without being asked. Now, let's return to the simplest sensory truth of sleep. Sleep begins when the body stops being on guard. That doesn't mean you become unconscious by force. It means the system decides it can downshift. So, if you want a final practice for tonight, make it physical. Let the face soften. Let the tongue rest. Let the shoulders fall. Let the belly loosen, even a little, so the breath can move without resistance. Then make the exhale slightly longer. You don't need to count. You can simply let the out-breath be unhurried, as if you are gently cooling a cup of tea. Longer exhales activate calming pathways in the nervous system. They tell the body that action is not required. And when action is not required, the system begins to release. If thoughts appear, don't wrestle them. Wrestling is engagement. Instead, let them be background noise. A radio in another room. You can hear it, but you don't have to listen. Return to the body again. The weight of your head on the pillow, the contact points at the shoulders and hips, the blanket's pressure, the coolness of air near the nose. If you wake later, you can do the same thing. Meet the moment with low interest, low light, low movement, low story. This is how you teach the brain that waking at night is not important. And the brain responds quickly to what it believes is important. So, make the night unimportant. Make it dull. Make it safe. In the background, your circadian clock continues keeping time. Sleep pressure continues rising and falling. Your brain continues traveling through stages, whether you track it or not. These processes are older than your worry. They are more patient than your mind. They have carried you through thousands of nights already. Tonight is just another night. You don't need to win it. You don't need to perfect it. You only need to stop fighting it. If sleep is close, it may arrive as a soft blur, a sentence you can't finish, a thought that dissolves midair, a heaviness that is not unpleasant, just quiet. If sleep is farther, you can still rest. You can still give your body stillness. You can still give your nervous system less stimulation. And those gifts matter. They are practice. And practice becomes pattern. And pattern becomes ease. So, let the night be what it is. Let your mind stop demanding a certain outcome. Let your body do what it knows. In the next and final moments, we'll let the science fade completely into stillness, the way a lamp is turned down until the room becomes gentle and dark. Tonight, we've walked through the quiet mechanics that hold you up when you are not trying to hold yourself up. We met the body clock, keeping the time with light and routine. We met sleep pressure, building slowly through the day, easing slowly through the night. We drifted through the stages, the light shoreline, the deeper currents, the dreaming sea. We learned that waking is often a normal pause between waves. We learned that the night becomes harder when it becomes a test. And we learned that the simplest path back is often the gentlest one. Dim light, steady rhythm, a longer exhale, and less fight. Now, you don't need to hold any of the facts in your mind. You can let them sink beneath the surface, because knowledge has done its work already. It has made the night less mysterious. It has made wakefulness less personal. It has replaced worry with a calmer explanation. And calm is the environment sleep prefers. So let your attention come back to the room, to the quiet, to the simple feeling of being supported. If you can, let your eyes rest without searching. Let your breath move without being improved. Let your thoughts pass without being answered. The day will still be there tomorrow, but tonight you are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to be still. You are allowed to let the body take over. Far beneath the surface, your systems continue their patient work. They balance chemistry. They settle memory. They lower the volume of stress. They prepare you for morning, not with urgency, but with quiet repair. And whether you fall asleep quickly or slowly, this is still true. The night is still doing what nights do. If you wake later, you can meet that moment with the same softness. No clock, no story, just breath, darkness, and the simple truth that nothing is required. And if you are already drifting, let the words become distant. Let them become like rain you hear through a window, steady and unimportant. Let the world outside move on without you. Here, in this small pocket of dark, you can rest. Here, you can release the day. Here, you can allow sleep to find you the way it always does when you stop chasing it. Good night.